panel now where we have 6 of our panelists in. And let's go right to Ariel Davis. Ariel, what are your thoughts about Greg Robinson's speech and his call for standing as a people, even if it means opposing a political agenda?
I think Greg touched on a lot of things that were representative of all Tulsans that we don't hear. I really like that he focused on the data. A lot of what he said was pulled directly from the equality indicators, which was pulled that the city of Tulsa put out. I think it's interesting that often when we hear Mayor G.T. Bynum talk about representing all Tulsans and the things that he's been trying to do, he always points to the record of what he's done, but he never really addresses here lately all of the disparities that we still have, all of the debtors' prisons that we still have. Some of the things Greg touched on, like that we don't have accessible documents in the city of Tulsa for our Latinx community who needs to be able to understand the city ordinances and charter just like anybody else so they can be informed citizens, food deserts. There are just a lot of things, and I honestly personally wish that Greg wins because I feel like he gave a voice to all of the people who have been voiceless for so long. It is one thing to put out a report that is full of data explicating a problem, but what I think it is so easy to forget is that there are actual people with real stories who are suffering behind those numbers. And I appreciate that he called out those things because I know that there are a lot of Tulsans who feel represented tonight who previously probably haven't.
Yes, you definitely heard him as he was talking about not just those who live north of 244, but also talking about our West Tulsa group, our Latino groups. He definitely touched on various portions of our population as well. All right, which one of our panelists wants to jump in next? Do you want to add your comments to Greg Robinson's basically what appears to be a concession speech?
I love Greg's speech. The thing that stood out to me is he said, we all need to be all right. And that's huge because we're not all okay. And we can talk about how great the city of Tulsa is, but when you have people that are suffering that don't have basic needs met in certain areas of our city, that's ridiculous. So kudos to Greg for an awesome speech and for an awesome campaign. And also the fact that he did get 30% of the vote within 2 months is pretty amazing.
All right, who's up next? Jump in.
But it really is amazing and very impressive. And I've got to think that Greg Robinson Sr., his late father, who came very, very close 18 years ago to being elected to the county commission from the north part of Tulsa County, he's got to be looking down with great pride in what his son has accomplished in such a short period of time. I was surprised that it was a concession speech. I guess perhaps some key precincts have just come in that have shown that he's not going to be able to hold Mayor Bynum below that 50% margin. There were still a few precincts that looked like they might shift things, but I think they've come in now. It really is incredible to see how much Bynum's support has collapsed, not only in North Tulsa, but also in Midtown, where he had been very strong, running in 60s, 70s, 80% against Mayor Bartlett, and now down below 50% in some of these Midtown precincts around, for example, the Yorktown neighborhood, precinct 50, a major shift away from Bynum to Greg Robinson.
Mm-hmm. Amanda Swope, as a chair of the Tulsa County Democratic Party, this is a very strong showing for Greg Robinson. Are you anticipating that we're going to see him run again, perhaps another office or this race again? What do you think?
I hope so. I know that it's very well known that before Greg ran, that even in his own right, he was very much considered to be a community leader. I think that's part of why he was able to mobilize the number of people he was so quickly, was that he was already really well known for doing what needed to be done to take care of the people in Tulsa as much as he could as just a citizen. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see him run again. I hope he does choose to run again for something else, or run for this again if he wants to.
All right, Wayne Green, your thoughts on this? And
well, wow!
speech,
first, what an impressive and challenging speech that was. It was full of vigor and hope and challenge, and I don't think we've seen the last of Greg Robinson. The challenge to G.T. Bynum is how well can he bring the city together in a meaningful way. Next Memorial Day will be marking the 100th anniversary of the Tulsa Race Massacre, and the world will be watching and demanding demanding answers to questions about the city of Tulsa, about whether this is a better community than it was 100 years ago. What's changed, and what have we done to atone for the sin of 1921? An awful lot of that answer will have to do with how well Mayor Bynum can bring together the divisions in the city of Tulsa in the next year.
Andrea Pemberton, with Typros, this is the young, dynamic political candidate. I would think that you, with your 918 vote, you're trying to engage voters. Do you think we'll see more of Greg Robinson?
I certainly hope so. I would like to share just a few quick data points from the Typros Policy legislative survey that we send out every year to try to get a pulse on what young people in our city are passionate about, what they care about in terms of their policy issues. So top one, jobs and economic development, followed by better funding for K through 12 schools, protecting minorities and LGBTQ communities, access to mental health resources, and reducing geographic and racial inequalities in our city. And I think that Greg certainly hit on many of these points in his speech. And I hope that regardless of who our mayor is, that we will see that these issues continue to be top priority for our city, because we certainly know that these are the things that young professionals care about.
Absolutely. And I do want to mention that we've got 94.05% of the precincts reporting. And again, those numbers have not changed. It's showing G.T. Bynum with 52.17% of the vote, Greg Robinson with 28.27% of the vote. And just an item of note, Ken Reddick drew about 14%, Craig Immel only 1.88%. So not really much of a challenge there from the other political, entries in this race. Your thoughts about that? I mean, did we just have such a powerhouse in G.T. Bynum that the other candidates, or were there just not enough organization in those races? What do you think?
You really cannot run a citywide race in such a short period of time and hope to be terribly successful. That Greg Robinson did so well is simply amazing. But you've got to reach, we're talking about 70,000 voters, and a lot of people who are not really thinking much about politics most of the time, and then and they see mailer after mailer from Mayor Bynum come through, and they see him on TV, and they're not hearing the controversy that people who are more politically engaged have been hearing the last few months.
Yes.
It's hard to overcome.
Dr. Mata, this is a tremendous call to action that we heard from Greg Robinson. He talked about his childhood, how he wanted to find pathways to their dreams. That's what he's hoping for others. Do you suppose a speech like this, or a successful campaign in such a short period of time for Greg Robinson, will that inspire others?
Yeah, so one of the things we've talked a lot about tonight are the vote margins, the fact that G.T. Bynum will get around 52% of the vote. But one of the things I said that we should talk about a little bit more earlier is turnout. Turnout with, some precincts still left to be counted is more than 10,000 votes than it was in 2016. A lot of Tulsans turned out to vote this time around. I think a lot of people were inspired by, various messages being aired in the campaign. And there's no doubt that Greg Robinson's campaign was a big part of that. And so I think that helps contribute to enthusiasm about this campaign. And I think you'll see that if we see an open mayor's seat in 2024, which is presumably where we're headed, that there's going to be a lot of enthusiasm to potentially challenge. So that'll be really interesting to watch.
Absolutely. Of course, Mayor G.T. Bynum saying that he would only serve, if elected a second time, these 2 terms. And unknown what his plans are after that. All right, so now the challenge for the incumbent mayor. Where do we go from here? Greg Robinson touching on some key racial inequity issues, education inequity issues. What do you suppose some of the key things that Mayor Bynum is now going to have to focus on to reunite the city? Because there definitely have been challenges in this past 6 months. Who would like to start with that?
I think he's going to have to focus on all of the things that he said he was going to focus on. Again, the first equality indicators report came out in 2018. That means he has the data. He has, again, ran on a platform that says he's going to use data to drive policy. So that means that he's going to have to try to figure out a way to address a lot of the inequity issues that exist in the city. Whether that's a food desert, whether that's debtor's prison, whether that's life expectancy outcomes. And he's going to have to appeal to his diverse constituents that this is a top priority for him. And that, quite frankly, public safety is a top priority for him. I think he's done a little bit of damage to his political reputation, especially in communities of color. So he's going to really have to work hard to repair that. So we'll see.
Risa?
Well, he's done, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, Michael, go ahead.
He's done damage both to the left and the right on public safety. Conservatives were offended by his decision to cut loose Live PD after claiming that he wasn't going to cave in. That was something even Greg Robinson noted, that he went from being tough guy on the radio in the morning to being to conceding to protesters in the afternoon. What's going to be interesting is what are his ambitions beyond being mayor? If he's not going to run for re-election in 4 years, if he intends to run for statewide office, he may very well see that his future is either going to be, well, if it's going to be as a Republican, which is how he's registered and how he came up in politics, he may shift in a very different direction than he has gone over the last 4 years, in order to position himself to run in a statewide race that's going to be dominated by conservative voters.
All right, Risa, do you want to pick up? Who's next?
To suggest that he has plans to run for any political office after mayor, because he sat in my office and said he had no such plans.
I've heard otherwise through the grapevine.